I was kicked out of my house on Christmas Eve by my own mother. No fight, no shouting match, no we need to talk. Just a black garbage bag stuffed with my clothes sitting on the frozen porch, sagging against the banister like a warning. You're a grown woman. Go figure it out, she said. Then she closed the door, locked it, turned off the porch light. I stood there in the dark, blinking snowflakes out of my eyelashes, clutching a bag that smelled like mildew and broken promises. It wasn't surprising, not really. I'd spent my whole life earning that moment. Growing up, my family had 2 children, my brother, Ryan, and the other one, me. Ryan was the golden boy, football star, future lawyer, born with a halo so bright it practically burned the rest of us to cinders. He could crash Dad's car drunk and still get a boys will be boys chuckle. Meanwhile, I got grounded for missing one algebra homework. I learned young that love in my family was transactional. You gave and gave and gave, and maybe, if you were lucky, you got crumbs. Birthdays? Ryan got party halls, ice sculptures, custom cakes. I got, oh, sorry, sweetie, we were just so busy this month. Graduation? Ryan's was a town event. Mine? A muttered good job over burnt toast. But I kept trying. God, I tried. I babysat Ryan's kids when he needed a break. Even though I was working 2 jobs, I lent Mom money when she forgot to pay the electric bill. I organized Dad's 60th birthday party, the one where, in front of 70 guests, he laughed into the microphone and said, "No one really cares what you think anyway, honey." The laughter stuck to me like oil, thick, smothering. I smiled, laughed with them, pretended it didn't matter, because that's what good daughters do, right? They swallow it down, they stay grateful, they make excuses for the people who shatter them. The final blow came a month before Christmas. Ryan was buying a new house, a McMansion way outside his means, and needed some help. My parents cornered me at Sunday dinner. Mom picked at her dry turkey, refusing to look at me. Dad cleared his throat. Ryan smiled, that fake, polished smile he reserved for bank managers and judges. "We're gonna co-sign," Dad said, "but our credit's a little tied up." "You have good credit, don't you, sweetie?" Mom added, still not meeting my eyes. I laughed. Out loud. I couldn't help it. "You want me to risk my financial future for Ryan's 3rd mortgage?" Silence. You could hear the mashed potatoes congealing. "It's family," Mom said finally. Like that word was supposed to crack me open and pour out my obedience. When I said no, it was like I'd slapped her. Ryan sulked. Dad glowered. 2 weeks later, I came home to find my stuff bagged and my room emptied. "It's time you grew up," Mom said. No goodbye, no hug, just a door in my face. I spent Christmas night in my car, curled in the back seat with a blanket I'd grabbed on my way out. No calls. No, "Are you okay?" The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "Hey, when can you come over to babysit?" I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Then I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and laughed. Not the nice kind of laugh. The kind that sounds like breaking glass. That was the moment I realized they didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I did for them. I wasn't a daughter, I was a convenience store. And the second I locked the door, turned off the lights, stopped giving, they kicked me to the curb. Something in me broke that night. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it finally healed. After that night, something inside me calcified. I didn't tell anyone where I was staying. I didn't call to explain. I didn't ask for my things back. The ones they hadn't already sold, broken, or borrowed into oblivion. I just disappeared. At first, they didn't notice. Or maybe they thought I'd come crawling back, the way I always had before, offering my time, my money, my spine, whatever it took, to buy another few scraps of affection. But this time, I was done trading pieces of myself for nothing. I got a dingy little apartment across town. The kind of place where the ceiling fans wobble like they're one good breeze away from decapitation. But it was mine. Nobody yelling down the hallway. Nobody accidentally spending my rent money on Ryan's car repairs. Silence tasted like freedom and loneliness, stirred together in one big choking gulp. The guilt trip started first. A text from Mom, "We're family. Family forgives. Hope you're happy ruining Christmas. Dad, it's a shame you've become so selfish." Ryan, of course, sent a Venmo request for $50 labeled for gas, like nothing had happened. I didn't answer. I watched the notifications pile up like mold in a forgotten fridge. Then came the rumors. Cousin Kelly called me at work one day, whispering like we were kids again, hiding from Uncle Frank's drunk rages. Hey, I don't know if you heard, but your mom's telling people you stole from her? Like, cash from her purse? I almost dropped the phone. Stole? I choked. I haven't even been in her house. Kelly sighed. I know. It's just. They're telling everyone you've gone off the deep end. Drugs, bad men, credit card fraud. The absurdity hit me like a gut punch. Drugs? Credit card fraud? I was the one who Venmo'd Ryan's overdue daycare bills more times than I could count. I was the one who bought Mom's medicine when she forgot to refill her prescription. But logic doesn't matter when the family PR machine decides you're the villain. I hung up and stared at the cracked paint on my apartment wall, breathing shallowly, the rage sitting low and molten in my chest. They wanted me to crawl back, to prove them right, to beg for forgiveness I didn't owe. Instead, I built walls they couldn't scale. I changed my number, deleted my social media, locked down every account with passwords no one could guess, switched banks, started therapy, real therapy, not the pray-it-away sessions my mom used to push. I became a ghost in their lives, and oh, how they hated it. 2 months later, I got an email from Dad. Subject line, family meeting. No body text, just an attachment, a scanned flyer for Ryan's grand opening of his new law office. I laughed so hard I scared the neighbor's cat off my porch. It was classic. Invite me to a meeting, guilt me into writing a check, then toss me back in the trash until the next emergency. For the first time in my life, I didn't even consider it. I didn't answer. That's when the real war started. Phone calls from blocked numbers, notes slipped under my door, flyers for Ryan's business shoved into my mailbox like confetti. Once, I caught Mom herself in the act, standing there in her stupid, puffy coat, shoving papers into my mail slot with a viciousness usually reserved for tabloid journalists chasing a scandal. When she saw me through the peephole, she didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stared, like I was a stranger. Good. That's what I was now. Still, the loneliness clawed at me some nights. The quiet got so loud it filled every corner. There were days I almost called, almost apologized for sins I didn't commit, just so I could feel like I belonged somewhere again. Almost. Instead, I bought a battered secondhand desk off Facebook Marketplace and started working double shifts at the local community office. I needed the money, but more than that, I needed something to fill the gaping, sucking wound where my family used to be. Work was steady, unexciting. Filing permits, answering angry emails, listening to complaints about potholes like they were matters of life and death. It didn't seem like much, but every paycheck, every problem solved, every thank you from a stranger filled in another missing piece of me. By spring, I had a tiny life stitched together from scraps. No fancy parties, no forced smiles, no staged family portraits where I was shoved to the side like a bad shadow. Just peace. For the first time in my life, nobody demanded I sacrifice myself to keep the peace. The more I healed, the more I saw it, the truth I'd been too scared to admit for years. My family didn't want me healthy. They wanted me hungry. Hungry for their approval. Hungry enough to bend and break and shrink myself down until I could fit neatly into the ugly, angry shape they'd carved for me. When I stopped starving, they lost control, and they would do anything to get it back. I found that out the hard way 3 months later when I opened my mail and saw it, a foreclosure notice. Not for me, for them. Ryan's big shiny house, the one he had so under control, gone. Auctioned off to pay debts he'd buried under a mountain of second chances. Their cries for help, their manipulation, their cruelty, all of it had been hiding one brutal truth. They were sinking, and they thought they'd pull me under with them. But I wasn't drowning anymore, I was learning how to swim, and the next time they came for me, I wouldn't just swim away. I'd make sure they couldn't follow. You'd think realizing my family was crumbling would bring me some sick satisfaction. It didn't. Not yet. At first, all I felt was this strange, hollow ache, like I'd pulled out a rotten tooth but could still feel the ghost of it throbbing in my jaw. They were drowning. And even after everything, the lies, the rumors, the eviction, Some sad, broken part of me still wanted to throw them a lifeline. Then I found out what they had really done. And any lingering guilt? It died a quick, ugly death. It started with a knock on my door. Not the usual late-night harassment or petty vandalism. A real knock. Polite. Measured. The first peeked through the window and almost fell over. It was Aunt Carol, my mom's estranged sister. I hadn't seen her since I was 12, when she left a family barbecue mid-fight and never came back. The family lore was that Carol was unstable, toxic, a thief. The kind of whispers they used to keep us scared and obedient. I cracked the door open, heart pounding. "I won't stay," she said quickly, rubbing her hands together like she didn't know what to do with them. I thought you should know what's going on." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She perched awkwardly on the edge of my ratty couch, glancing around like she expected a trap to spring. "They've been bad-mouthing you all over town," she said. "Same old crap. But that's not why I'm here." She dug into her purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the coffee table. I stared at it. It looked harmless. Ordinary. "Go ahead," she said. "You deserve to know." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, bank statements. Legal documents. Signed forms. Forms with my name forged on them. I scanned the pages, my vision tunneling, the words blurring together. Credit lines. Loans. Thousands of dollars. In my name. All opened after I turned 18. All tied back to addresses I hadn't lived at for years. Their addresses. Ryan's house. My parents' house. They hadn't just used me for babysitting, free labor, and emotional punching bags. They'd used my identity. They'd built their shiny little lives on the back of my credit. And when I refused to co-sign Ryan's newest money pit, they'd tossed me out like garbage. Because I wasn't useful anymore. I felt sick. The room tilted. Aunt Carol reached out a hand, then thought better of it. "I found all that when your dad tried to pull the same thing with me," she said quietly. "That's why I left. Why I stayed away. I figured you'd want proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the years of feeling used, discarded, invisible weren't just in my head. Proof that love, in my family, had always been a con job." I sat there for a long time, the papers spread out around me like a funeral. Then something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was clarity, cold and sharp as a knife. I finally saw them for what they were. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. Aunt Carol stayed long enough to help me put the documents in order. She knew a lawyer, she said. Someone who owed her a favor. We set up a meeting for the following week. "They're going to come after you harder," she warned, as she zipped up her purse. "Play the victim. Cry to anyone who listens." "Be ready," I nodded. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to swallow it. Over the next few days, I built my case. I pulled my credit reports. Highlighted every fraudulent account, every stolen dollar. I traced the forged signatures, Mom's shaky loops, Dad's aggressive slashes, Ryan's lazy scrawl. All right there, plain as day. I gathered every voicemail, every threatening text, every public post they'd made trying to destroy my reputation. Aunt Carol's lawyer, a wiry, no-nonsense woman named Miss Patel, looked it all over with a grim smile. "We have enough for civil fraud, identity theft, and emotional damages," she said. "If we want to get aggressive, maybe even criminal charges." I nodded, feeling strangely detached, like I was floating above my own body. "Let's get aggressive," I said. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about finally ripping the mask off, forcing them to face the truth they'd spent decades burying under guilt trips and casseroles and fake apologies. For once, they would be the ones answering for their actions. I filed the lawsuit 2 weeks later, quietly, surgically, no screaming matches, no public confrontations, just cold, hard paperwork. I didn't announce it, didn't gloat, didn't warn them. I wanted them to feel safe, to think they'd won. I wanted them to plan their next barbecue or Facebook smear campaign in blissful ignorance. And then I wanted the hammer to fall. A few days after the paperwork was served, I got a voicemail from Mom. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. "How could you do this to us? We're your family. We're ruined. You're ruining everything." For the first time in my life, her tears didn't move me, because they weren't about me. They were about losing their free ride. They were about the shame, the exposure, the consequences they thought they'd never have to face. I played the voicemail twice. Then I deleted it. The fallout was just beginning. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't sad. I was ready. And for once, it was their turn to be powerless. The lawsuit hit them like a bomb. At first, there was silence. Then the rage started. Voicemails, emails, letters, Facebook posts littered with vague statuses about betrayal and ungrateful children. Cousins I'd barely spoken to since high school started sending me long, rambling DMs about forgiveness and second chances. Ryan tried calling me at work, demanding I fix this before you embarrass the whole family. His voice cracked halfway through the voicemail. It was the first real crack I'd ever heard in his golden boy armor. I didn't answer. I didn't respond. I let the silence do the talking. Meanwhile, Miss Patel worked like a surgeon, filing injunctions, freezing assets, gathering depositions. The more we dug, the worse it got. Turns out the accounts opened in my name weren't the only crimes. Ryan had taken out fake PP loans during the pandemic. Mom had borrowed against the life insurance policy my grandmother left me, the one I was supposed to inherit when I turned 25. Dad had been moving money between accounts like a drunk 3-card Monte hustler, trying to stay one step ahead of foreclosure. They weren't just bad parents, they were criminals. The case started snowballing. Fast. Subpoenas went out. Bankers who used to golf with my dad on Saturdays were suddenly unable to comment. Ryan's boss, who once sent him Christmas baskets and called him the future of the firm, dropped him like a live grenade. Even their friends, the ones who used to call me selfish and dramatic behind my back, started backing away, suddenly too busy to return phone calls or host wine nights. Without their polished image, without their carefully curated lies, my parents and Ryan looked exactly like what they were: desperate, broke, and guilty as hell. The cherry on top? Ryan's shiny new law office, the one they'd guilted me into supporting, was raided by state investigators. I heard about it secondhand, through a friend who worked downtown. Apparently, Ryan had been operating without proper licensing, skimming consultation fees off desperate clients, laundering small amounts of cash through processing errors. When the agents showed up, he tried to sneak out the back door. They caught him in the alley, red-faced and stammering, still wearing his $1,000 shoes. Chef's kiss. The day of the court hearing, I dressed simply. Dark slacks, a soft blue blouse, no flashy jewelry, no bright colors. I wanted to look invisible. I wanted them to feel seen. I walked into the courtroom alone. No family cheering in the back row. No fake friends whispering encouragement. Just me, my lawyer, and the quiet certainty that I wasn't crazy. They were already seated when I entered. Mom looked bloated and pale, clutching a tissue like a life raft. Dad sat stiff and furious, jaw working like he was chewing on barbed wire. Ryan didn't meet my eyes. Good. They didn't deserve my gaze. The judge was a no-nonsense woman with sharp glasses and sharper questions. She grilled them mercilessly, walking through every forged document, every fake signature, every manipulated account. Watching them squirm was almost satisfying. But it wasn't the humiliation I craved. It was the truth. For so many years, they made me doubt my own memories, my own worth, my own reality. Sitting there, listening to them stumble and lie and contradict themselves under oath, something inside me stitched itself back together. I didn't need their love. I didn't need their approval. I needed my damn life back. After 4 hours of brutal testimony, the judge made her ruling: full restitution for all damages, legal fees paid in full, public record of identity theft and financial fraud, recommendation for criminal investigation pending state review. Mom sobbed, loud, messy, unrestrained. Dad had turned the color of bad meat. Ryan just stared at the table, motionless, like a child who broke something too big to hide. I felt nothing. No glee, no triumph. Just a clean, echoing silence where their claws used to be. As I stood to leave, Mom reached for me. "Please," she gasped. "We're still your family." I pulled my arm away like she burned me. "No," I said, voice calm, steady. "You're just people who raised me." And then I walked out. No backward glance, no hesitation. Outside the courthouse, the spring air smelled new, clean. I stood there for a moment, blinking up at the sky, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders. The family that tried to break me, ruin me, erase me, had finally been forced to reckon with the truth. They weren't the victims, they never were. And I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. Later that night, as I sat on my tiny balcony with a cup of cheap red wine, I got a text from Aunt Carol. Just 2 words, "Proud of you." I smiled. Not a shaky, uncertain smile. A real one. A smile that said, "I'm free." For the first time, I didn't owe anyone anything. Not my time, not my forgiveness, not my silence. Just me, my own messy, imperfect, beautiful life stretching out ahead, untouched by their claws. Untouchable. Freedom didn't feel the way I thought it would. It wasn't fireworks or confetti or some grand Instagrammable moment. It was quieter, like standing in the middle of an empty house after everyone's moved out and realizing you can finally breathe. The months after the court hearing passed in a strange blur. The town buzzed with gossip for a while. I overheard whispers at the grocery store, got a few pitying looks at the gas station. Ryan's face showed up once in the local newspaper, right under a headline about misconduct allegations and pending charges. For a hot second, part of me tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the inevitable ambush, the tearful apology tour, the neighbors with casseroles and fake concern. But it didn't come. They were too busy trying to save themselves. According to Aunt Carol, who, by some small miracle, became the closest thing to family I had left, my parents had sold the house, quietly, cheaply, under the table to some shady real estate developer who flipped houses for fast cash. Last I heard, they were living in a 2-bedroom rental on the outskirts of town, fighting over who forgot to pay the water bill. Ryan fled too. Skipped town under some vague excuse about opportunity and new beginnings. Word had it, he was bartending at a dive 3 states over, living paycheck to paycheck. Karma, as it turns out, wasn't subtle. Meanwhile, the first stayed. I stayed in my creaky little apartment, kept filing permits and dealing with the endless bureaucratic nightmares that came with working for a small-town government. I stayed and I thrived. It didn't happen overnight. The first few months were hard, lonely. Some nights I curled up on the couch with frozen pizza and bad TV, wondering if I'd made a mistake, wondering if maybe, just maybe, I'd overreacted. But every time the doubt crept in, I thought about that Christmas Eve, standing outside in the dark, clutching a garbage bag full of my life, while the people who loved me turned off the porch light and went back to laughing over dessert. And the doubt shriveled and died. I wasn't overreacting, I was surviving. I took night classes, small ones at first, budgeting, public speaking, civics, things that seemed boring but, weirdly, felt like acts of rebellion. Knowledge my family never wanted me to have, strength they never wanted me to build. Piece by piece, I rebuilt the life they tried to shatter. I made friends, real friends, people who didn't flinch when I said no, who didn't demand explanations when I set boundaries. I saved money, paid off every fraudulent account they opened in my name, not because I had to, but because I wanted no ties left binding me to them. I started volunteering at local events. First just small things, farmers markets, cleanup days, then bigger things. I got noticed. People started asking me for advice, for leadership, for ideas. And one day, almost by accident, someone said the words that would change everything. "You should run for office." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. Me? The girl who wasn't good enough for her family's Christmas table? The girl who grew up believing her voice was a burden no one wanted to hear? But the idea lodged in my brain like a seed, and it grew. 2 years later, I stood on the steps of City Hall, swearing the oath of office as the newly elected mayor of my hometown. Mayor of the town where my family told everyone I was a thief, a junkie, a black sheep. Mayor of the town where I learned the hard way that blood isn't thicker than betrayal. Mayor, standing in front of the people who had once looked right through me. I didn't invite my parents to the ceremony, didn't even bother sending an announcement. But they showed up anyway. Of course they did. I spotted them lingering at the back of the crowd, Mom in a dated coat, Dad with his jaw clenched, Ryan lurking behind them like a bad smell. They didn't clap. They didn't smile. They just watched. When the speeches ended, they tried to approach, Mom with tears in her eyes. Dad with a stiff hand half extended, Ryan looking everywhere but at me. For a moment, the little girl in me stirred, the one who used to ache for their approval, who would have done anything for one genuine smile, but she was gone. I turned away without a word, and it felt good. No guilt, no second guessing, just the clean, sharp peace of finally choosing myself. It didn't end there, though. A few months into my term, Ryan came knocking, figuratively, this time. He submitted a zoning request for a piece of land he was developing red, flipping for fast cash. It needed mayoral sign-off, and technically, it was my job to review it. The paperwork landed on my desk like a ghost. I flipped through it, sloppy, incomplete, full of shortcuts and half-truths, exactly what I'd expect. He included a handwritten note, too. Would really appreciate your help. Family first, family first. The same family that sold my identity like it was a used car. The same family that left me to sleep in my car on Christmas Eve. The same family that only remembered my name when they needed a favor. I smiled, a real, full smile. And then I denied the request, formally, legally, publicly. The record would show Ryan's application didn't meet ethical or municipal standards. Simple, professional. But the message was clear. You don't get to set me on fire and then ask me for warmth. The fallout was immediate. Ryan tried to appeal, whined to city council, threw tantrums on social media. I ignored every single one. They said I was heartless. They said I was vindictive. They said I should remember where I came from. But the truth is, I remembered exactly where I came from, and I wasn't going back. The town moved on. People forgot. New scandals replaced old gossip. Life continued. And me? I kept building a new home, a new life, a new family, one made of friends, allies, people who showed up without strings attached. Sometimes I drive past my old neighborhood, past the cracked sidewalks and peeling paint, past the ghosts of a life that almost broke me. I don't stop, I don't wave, I just roll down the window, let the wind whip through my hair, and keep driving. Because the past doesn't own me anymore. Because I am no one's scapegoat. Because I am not their failure. Because I am mine. And they said I was heartless, but for once, I put my heart first. And I never ever looked back. Story 2. Grace is my name. I recently received my degree in business communications from a tiny Pennsylvania college, and I am 24 years old. 3 years ago, I would have laughed out if you had asked me if I would eventually return to my parents' old beige house in the Pittsburgh suburbs after college. However, life has a humorous way of reminding you that things don't always go as planned. On a somber April afternoon, I clutched the handle of my battered bag and headed back to my family's comfortable beige home. But I kept telling myself that this was only going to last for 3 months, maybe 4 at most, and that I would save up enough money for a down payment on a modest apartment close to the city center. I'd already seen it in my imagination. A warm kitchen, large windows that let in plenty of natural light, and peaceful nights spent with just me and a nice cup of tea. Fortunately, the job search didn't take as long as I had anticipated. Madison & Cole, a rapidly expanding marketing agency in downtown Pittsburgh, made me an offer within 2 weeks. Although the initial pay wasn't very substantial, it was sufficient to provide me a sense of security. The quarterly performance bonuses also seemed like a good idea. I may achieve my objective of financial freedom even more quickly if I performed well. I sat with my folks at the dining table that evening. Excitement fills my heart. Dad was looking through an old newspaper as Mom was preparing tomato meatballs. I was unable to contain myself any longer, so I joyfully declared that I had been hired by Madison & Cole. The clinking of knives and forks ceased instantly before I even noticed the difference in the air. And there are quarterly incentives in addition to a good pay. Mom set her fork down. Her eyes were serious. Will you be moving out soon? Her tone was calm yet icy as she inquired. My smile vanished from my lips as I froze. Yes, most likely in 3 or 4 months. Prior to renting my own house, I would like to save a bit more money. An all too familiar gaze that seldom indicated anything positive was exchanged between my parents. Dad began the same old lecture after clearing his throat. Grace, you are aware that due to her back condition and mine, your mother is only able to work part-time at the library. He paused. At the plant, there are whispers of layoffs, Mom said, sounding as though she were delivering a heartbreaking story. Your assistance with family expenditures is much needed. It would be easier for your work if you stayed here for free. Don't you think that just makes more sense? I felt a weight in my chest as I gazed down at the cooling meatballs on my plate. Another part of me, the one that yearned for independence, roared in protest, even if they weren't incorrect. Finally, I faked a grin and nodded. I suppose I can remain a bit longer. Suddenly, my new existence had begun. I enjoyed supper with my parents, got up early for work, and helped out with the utility bills at night. It appeared to be all right at first. I kept telling myself that I was doing the right thing by supporting my family for the time being, and that I would soon have a place of my own. I kept telling myself it was only a passing phase. 3 months would pass quickly. But by the time the 4th month arrived, I began to realize that something was seriously off. Mom was waiting for me in the living room one Friday night when I arrived home from a long, demanding day of working on a new client campaign. On the table before her, a sizable envelope appeared as though it had been there all day. When she talked, I hadn't even removed my shoes. Although she spoke softly, her voice was colder as the winter wind outside. With your present pay, Grace, your father, and I performed some calculations. You are able to make a larger contribution to household costs. I blinked as a shiver went through my body. What are you saying? Dad's remarks trailed off as he left the kitchen with a water bill. Electricity. Water.online. Everything is rising. We cannot continue to cover it alone. The offer of no rent had initially been simply nice talk, so I tightened my hold on my bag strap. They had everything set up to encourage me to pay extra. Now that I was settling into my work, I already make weekly grocery purchases. I added, attempting to maintain my composure, and I have also been paying my electricity bills since last month. Mom gave me a sad little grin and shook her head. Grace, that's only a little portion. We truly need you to give a certain amount each month at this time. Consider it a form of family duty sharing. With a sinking heart, I gripped my bag tighter. Every time I felt like I was moving forward, I felt like I was being yanked back by another unseen chain. I was only going to be here for a couple of months. With a cracked voice, I reminded them, to move out, I'm saving money. Dad's face hardened as he crossed his arms. While saving money is a wonderful thing, family is family. When we need you, you can't abandon us. The line family is family kept repeating in my mind like a depressing, never-ending tune. Too exhausted to protest, I gave a soft yes and rushed upstairs, swallowing the knot in my throat. In the days that followed, everything seemed to be under a thin coating of pressure. Light talk was no longer part of dinner. It was a constant barrage of subliminal warnings about new costs, roof repairs, and growing gas bills. Mom would remark as she held the heating bill, "This winter is really harsh. It would be so much simpler if someone could provide a bit more." Silently, with a growing sense of bitterness, I ate my cold soup. I was working on Madison and Cole's quarterly report at my desk one Saturday afternoon, when Mom came in the door with a stack of family health insurance documents. Her comments were piercing, yet she had a charming grin. "Grace, we thought you might be able to assist with a tiny portion of the insurance premiums. Health is everything, you know." I gazed up at her as if she were a stranger. "I don't even currently have my own insurance, Mom. You're healthy and youthful. You'll be all right." As if it were entirely normal for me to be carrying the whole family that night while resting in my old room and listening to the howling wind outside, she interrupted me with a breezy voice. When precisely had I become the walking pocketbook of the family? I wondered. My initial strategy, to save for 3 months and move out right immediately, was as flimsy as smoke and was quickly derailed by guilt trips, sharp remarks, and suggestive looks cloaked in worry. I understood that I would never be permitted to leave this house if I remained there. I shut my eyes. My chest was heavy with the weight of an unformed choice, but a small flame glowed deep inside. I knew I couldn't continue to be this way indefinitely. I hadn't even planned my next course of action yet. When the front door opened one Sunday afternoon, a chilly October wind blew in. My sister, Lauren, who was 8 years my senior, was married to Craig and had 2 little children, Mason, who was 3, and Ella, who was 5. Despite living 2 states away, she unexpectedly arrived today with her entire family. The hall echoed with laughter. Grace reclined back in the music while Ian went for the gases, Craig, Travis, and I. In fact, this is. In Mason, I'm being crowded out by all of the males. It's been a long time. She hurried over, giving the children hugs and gushing over them as if they were the cutest creatures in the world. I silently watched from the kitchen doorway while holding a glass of water. A part of me was already accustomed to this, the way Dad left his favorite sports show to meet Craig at the door, the way Mom brightened up when she saw Lauren, the way everything in the home felt so alive. Only when Lauren was present. "Could you get Craig another glass, Grace?" Without even looking at me, Mom replied in a lovely voice. Silently, I put down my glass of water and got another, like a shadow sweeping over the space. I discovered something new that evening. The fact that I had grown up, graduated with honors, and was responsible for a significant portion of the family costs didn't matter. My parents would always see me as Lauren's supporting cast member. She was the subject of every talk during supper. Mom was always inquiring about the new home. Craig and Lauren had recently purchased the opulent Christmas trip they had planned, or the fancy school they were thinking of enrolling Ella in. "Is Ella yet to learn to read?" With pride gleaming in her eyes, my mother inquired. "Mom, she's reading children's books already." Lauren smiled. "Mason is also learning to swim. He's doing great. That's fantastic." With a proud expression on her face, Mom turned to face my dad and shouted, "Our daughter is very exceptional. I was not questioned about my work at Madison and Cole. Nobody cared that I was attempting, nor did they inquire about the campaigns I had won or the late hours I spent trying to make deadlines, that I was creating my own life." After supper, as I was doing the dishes, I broke up my meatball into little pieces and chewed quietly, hardly tasting anything. Behind me, Lauren emerged nonchalantly, drinking a glass of white wine while resting on the kitchen counter. "Are you still residing here?" She laughed as though it were the strangest thing ever. "Yes," I said quickly as I scrubbed a dish in the hot water. "She's suggesting that it's a little strange to live with your parents at this age." I turned and met her eyes, which were the same shade of light blue as Mom's. I tried to seem cool as I added, "I'm here to help them pay the bills." Lauren took another sip and shrugged. "It has to be done by someone. They're lucky to have you." Despite her kind smile, every word was painful. That night, I picked at my chest. I'm sitting in my room as Craig and Lauren joke in the living room. I was no longer even depressed, simply a chilly numbness. I was never picked first. In this house, I had never even been an option. I was only the stand-in, the underpaid assistant, and the backup. When Lauren's spotlight became a bit dimmer, clearer than ever, the concept inched its way into my head. No one would save me if I didn't. It was all over in an instant. Lauren and Craig moved in with my parents for a short time just 2 weeks ago, saying their new home was being renovated. After a hard day at work, I can still clearly recall that afternoon when I dragged myself up the porch stairs, only to find their SUV parked outside and hear the kids' loud shrieks coming from the yard. Mom. I had never seen her face light up that brightly, met me at the entrance. "Grace, I'm glad you're back home. Mason and Ella are vivacious. I can't keep up with you and your dad." Mason slammed into my legs before I had even removed my coat. Lauren circles the couch while holding a marker in her chocolate-stained hands. From the kitchen, Lauren stuck her head out. Her blonde hair was tied back. She had a cheerful, carefree face. "My dear, the timing was ideal. We were considering going out to eat dinner. You don't mind spending a few hours watching the children, do you?" I started to object, but my mother spoke first. Her voice was as sweet as honey. "I'm not as sprite as your father and I used to be, you know. You're the only one who can keep up with them, Grace." I surveyed the unkempt house. There are toys all over the place. I swallowed the lump in my throat and noticed fresh stains on the carpet. "Just a couple of hours," I mumbled, trying to convince myself. However, a few hours was never just that. After dinner, there were drinks with friends, coffee, and a late-night movie. I stayed up until almost midnight that night, urging Mason to fall asleep as she sobbed for her mother. I attempted to sit down with my parents the following day to express how overwhelmed I was, but all I received were contemptuous glances. All night long, my back was hurting. Dad rubbed his hip and moaned. "I am no longer able to chase after the little ones." Emotionally, mainly for herself, she sighed. "I also suffered from a headache all morning, Grace. They can only be handled by someone as young and powerful as you." Thus, an implicit agreement was reached. The default babysitter was Grace. I worked from 8 to 5, came home exhausted, and immediately became the unpaid nanny. On weekends when my buddies went on excursions, attended festivals, or just slept in, I juggled Mason's meals, Ella's coloring sessions, tidying up the house before my parents' impromptu gatherings. Once, I dared to ask for a weekend off, only to be met with a surprised stare as if I had just done a severe sin. "You can't just think about yourself, Grace," Mom murmured, her voice laden with remorse. "Lauren and Craig need some time together. The kids are little. Who else will care for them if not you?" I kept silent in this house. Every debate focused on one issue: everyone else's needs. Mine just didn't exist. Worse, Lauren began to accept my presence as a given. Every time I stepped through the door after work, she was there waving a list of duties. Feed Mason. Help Ella with preschool tasks. Laundry should be folded. Toys should be cleaned. Lauren once stated, "We're going on a date night." As I bounced a sobbing Mason on my hip, I applied lipstick in front of the living room mirror. "You'll get it eventually. For you, this is a positive, real-world experience." I gritted my teeth, feeling as though I were being bound to someone else's life. I could feel myself losing small parts of myself every day, and a voice continued to get louder in the background. "Grace, it's time to change. Nobody will get up if you don't." As I entered the room on a chilly Tuesday night, I received the news. Lauren sat tensely at the kitchen table, holding her phone tightly. With his hands raking through his disheveled brown hair, Craig was pacing the living room. Mom showed up before I could inquire what was going on. She sounded as though she had just been struck. "Get ready. We must speak." I felt sick to my stomach as I untied my scarf. Mom spoke hastily, wringing her hands. "I just got notice. His business failed. Lauren's family's primary source of income was lost." I turned to face Lauren. She sat with one hand over her face, her shoulders trembling a little, and her head down. Even though I knew she was my sister, I was still feeling uneasy. "Dream, what is the current plan?" Trying to speak steadily, I asked. With a look of desperation in her eyes, Mom looked at Dad and then back at me, suggesting that they should temporarily move in here until they were able to get back on their feet. With 4 extra people and the constant pandemonium of 2 tiny children, our 4-bedroom house already seemed claustrophobic, so I froze. "How about my room?" With a constricted throat, I asked. Mom took a while to respond. "We've spoken about it," Dad added, clearing his throat. "Mason and Ella require a secure environment in which to play. We believe you ought to vacate your room." "And me?" I swallowed hard. As if saying it quickly would make it sound less crazy, Mom added, "You can move into the storage room. Grace, only for a short bit. You're still young. You will adapt." I tasted blood as I bit my lip so hard. The storage space. There was hardly enough room for a desk and a twin bed. The spot where old Christmas ornaments and stacks of newspapers that Dad couldn't discard had always been stacked high. I felt like screaming. I wanted to know why my needs were prioritized over everyone else's. Instead, feeling as though my life had been stolen once more, I simply nodded rigidly and went upstairs. Every time I took another box out of the storage room that weekend, I cleaned it up. I became numb in one place. For years, my bedroom served as my haven. It was carpeted, repainted in gentle colors, and stocked with toys. On the day Lauren and Craig arrived home, the house became a frenzied swarm. Mason and Ella let loose and yelled through the corridors. While Craig struggled in the dining room with Mason's crib, Lauren ruled her court like a queen, directing the furnishings. Mom was infatuated with the children and couldn't stop. Dad made Craig coffee as if he were a distinguished visitor. And me? I disappeared into my new room, rebuilding my frail twin bed while fighting back sighs. After everything had subsided that evening, I went to the kitchen to get something to eat. The noises of a cartoon Ella was watching filled the living room, and a platter of cold cookies was resting on the table. Mom remarked, "Grace, could you watch Ella and Mason tomorrow?" As soon as she saw me, "Craig and Lauren need to finish off some paperwork." I went cold. "I'm employed." In a hoarse voice, I reminded her, "Only at night." She mentioned that platters were already being cleared. "Only a few of ours. You're still young. You're capable of managing it." I can hardly recall how I got back to my small room that evening. All I know is that while I laid there, I heard Mom gently telling Lauren that everything will be well, Ella laughing, and loud phone calls. All I had left was this small room and a sense of loneliness that seemed to permeate every breath. The fact that Lauren and Craig's move-in was the start of a true nightmare quickly became apparent. Mason's yelling at 6 in the morning now marked the beginning of my days. Ella knocked on my door whenever she could. Before work even gave me 5 minutes of solitude, the home was rumbling with footfall, toys clattering, and cartoons blasting in my little room. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet. Mason would frequently infiltrate and cover my papers with cookie crumbs or crayon smears. I once scraped crayon stains off a client contract due for the whole night. Craig and Lauren lived like they were on vacation the following morning. The majority of Lauren's time was spent conversing with friends or browsing social media. Craig sat at the kitchen table and seemed to be looking for a job, but he was really just playing games. Parents, it was turmoil that exhilarated them. Mom would laugh every time I brought up the mess or the loudness. They are only children. Give them freedom. Dad wouldn't. The chaos and commotion were evidence of a contented family. I dragged myself home from work just to be caught up in the same never-ending loop, watching children, preparing food, cleaning. Dinner turned into a mad dash, chopping Mason's meal and cleaning up Ella's liquid. I was forcing myself to eat my own cold leftovers. Even worse, the costs began to soar. I had to read the new power bill 3 times before I could see it clearly. Due to my parents' meager pensions and Lauren and Craig's unstable financial situation, it was almost double what it had been, and it all landed on me. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, my hands trembled as I brought it up at dinner one Thursday night. I placed the power bill on the table and said, "We need to talk about the bills. I can't continue to cover everything on my own." Lauren frowned as she raised her head from her phone. "It's incredibly rude of you to bring up money at this time, Grace." Mom spoke up right away, her tone full of criticism. "Craig and Lauren are having a hard time, you know. Family members are meant to help one another. It's not nickel and dime, everything." I tightened my chest and balled my fists beneath the table. "And who's on my side?" My voice trembled as I asked. "I also have a full-time job. I have to put money down for my own future." Craig mumbled and snorted. "The future? Is saving for later that year really necessary for a single girl?" It was like being slapped across the face. My chair squealed on the floor as I got to my feet. I took the money in my hands and remarked icily, "I understand. I'll do my share. The remainder. Try it yourself." I pivoted and made my way back to the storage area. Behind me, like 1,000 small blades, came the sound of laughing and whispered remarks. I had trouble sleeping that night. I listened to footsteps racing down the hallway while I lay awake on the little bed. My mother whispering about how Lauren manages family pressure so well while the late-night TV blares below. One idea burned brightly in my thoughts amid the shadows. I couldn't continue to live this way if I continued to remain. For the first time in months, I would lose what remained of myself. I opened my laptop, sat up, and began looking for flats. I was leaving even though I wasn't sure where I was heading yet, and I wasn't turning around this time. I had just finished brewing my coffee on Saturday morning when Mom came into the kitchen with a large bundle of money. With a loud thud, as though she wanted everyone to hear, she dropped it on the table. "Grace, we must discuss the bills for groceries, water, power, and the internet." With a solemn look, she started. I put down my coffee. My heart is lowering. I knew this was going to be a bad conversation. "Everything has become more costly," Mom said, her tone hinting at resentment. "The population of this place has increased. Costs are greater, of course." I tried to remain composed as I nodded. For that reason, I proposed. Slowly, the first stated that everyone should properly split the cost of life. I have a piece, and each family has a piece. Everyone will find it simpler in this way. Suddenly, there was stillness in the kitchen. Lauren descended the steps. Her face appeared as fresh as if nothing had happened, and her hair was immaculate. She laughed dryly when she overheard the talk, sending shivers down my spine. "Grace?" Lauren stated in a sarcastic yet honey-sweet voice. "Will you truly take advantage of your own family?" Craig yelled from the living room, delivering yet another insult that infuriated me. "You still have the guts to bring this up while we're having a hard time." He shook his head inwardly, as if I were the most unappreciative kid in America. Family is about grace and sacrifice. It's not always possible to focus on money. With a voice as hard as a gavel, Mom struck the last blow. If you refuse to assist while the family is having difficulties, which type of family member do you belong to? I swallowed all the arguments that were lodged in my throat and bit my lip hard. Any explanation I offered would simply be dismissed as being unappreciative. They wanted to give me a smack. I felt a firm grip on my heart as I turned away. Like the coldness that was creeping up on me, the coffee in my hand had gone cold. My animosity was no longer a simmering ache after that day. It developed into a storm that grew stronger every day. I continued to serve as Lauren and Craig's free weekend babysitter. Lauren would contact me every Friday afternoon with something like, "Craig and I have plans. You will see Ellen Mason writing tomorrow evening. Regards, my love." Like it was inevitable. It's not worth asking. My parents continued to make excuses for their health whenever I suggested that they might be able to assist. Dad is experiencing headaches. Ari's mother is experiencing back pain. Grace, we're becoming old. Time and again, the same broken record. I was caught in a never-ending circle in the meanwhile. Work, clean, babysit, and pay bills. I once had the audacity to refuse basic SMS messages. It's a hectic weekend for me. Not able to watch children. My phone exploded with missed calls and guilt trip texts from Lauren, my dad, and my mother in a matter of minutes, all of which had the same accusatory tone. The family is being let down by you. Your sister has endured a great deal. Only self-centered individuals abandon their families at difficult times. At this point, every phrase seemed like a stab to my dignity. I didn't feel bad. I simply felt empty. While I was cleaning up the toys that were all over the living room on Sunday night, Lauren came in carrying a smoothie. "Tomorrow morning, Craig and I are going to look at model homes," she replied nonchalantly. "You will thus have to supervise the children once more." I felt like ice as I froze and stared at her. "You are aware that I also have a life," even though I spoke with such a severe tone. Lauren grinned icily and shrugged. "Oh, Grace, you work a desk job and live with your folks. What on earth is keeping you so busy?" I straightened up and looked her in the eyes. I wasn't afraid for the first time in months, without hesitation. "Just wait," I whispered. "Soon enough you'll know." Lauren's irritated, perplexed countenance was gone as I turned and left. A plan was developing inside of me, and this time I vowed that no one would ever again shatter my aspirations. In the little storage area, I sat huddled up. Uneven shadows are being produced on the walls by the low light from an ancient desk lamp. I was holding a text message from my college closest friend, Rachel. This weekend, Grace was organizing a ski vacation to Blue Ridge Mountain. Join us. Do you need a vacation from that crazy home? Torn, I gazed at the television. I had the need to say no. As usual, say I was afraid, too busy, or had family responsibilities. This time, however, I felt a strong need. I needed to go. I needed to take a breath. I had to remind myself that there was more to life than this never-ending cycle of paying bills, taking care of the kids, and cleaning. I returned the type. "I'm on board. Please reserve a space for me." Then I heard someone knock on the door. Lauren took a quick look inside. Her flawless golden locks were wrapped up nicely. She smiled as if she had never experienced adversity. "Bravo," she sang. "This Saturday, Craig and I received an invitation to Uncle Gene's birthday celebration downtown. Dad and Mom are also coming. You're going to watch Ellen Mason?" My voice sounded quieter than I had anticipated. "I'm sorry, but this weekend I won't be home." Lauren scowled, unable to comprehend. As if I were going snowboarding with my pals. I spoke it again, focusing on each word. The room's air felt as though it had frozen. "You're joking." Lauren laughed sharply. "This is a family matter, Grace." "I'm not joking, though," I murmured as I got to my feet, experiencing a surge of fresh power. "I am entitled to my own life. I'm no longer your free babysitter." Shouting reverberated below within minutes. Pride Month. However, they are all contributing to a disorganized chorus of indignation. "You're leaving your family behind to go skiing?" "Grace," Mom let out a cry. "Your lack of responsibility is astounding," Dad snarled. "You violated the confidence we had in you." Craig added as though he was the most qualified person to talk to her, squeezed. Lauren's voice was quivering with rage as she pointed a finger directly at me. "Don't ever return if you leave this house this weekend." Her words were like a hammer to my chest, but instead of falling apart as they would have, I just grinned. I hadn't smiled so freely in months. I replied icily, "Don't worry, I have no plans to return, therefore I'm going." As though they were still in shock over what they had just heard, they stood still. However, I didn't give them time to respond. I went upstairs, turned around, and began packing. Just a few of outfits, my laptop, and private documents. I was prepared to abandon the others without hesitation. Behind me, I could hear my father yelling, my mother sobbing from below, and Lauren's irate voice whirling like a whirlwind. However, I didn't turn around. Not once. I was driving my old automobile right out of the street a few hours later. I had moved on from the oppressive walls and the people who could only make demands and never comprehend. I slept on Rachel's little couch that night, in a warm, laughing-filled apartment. In a long time, for the first time, I was able to breathe air free of expectations and bitterness. I awoke the next morning on Rachel's couch. I imagined a peculiar sensation of comfort, a feeling I had forgotten for months, as weak winter sunshine filtered through the drapes. I was given a steaming cup of coffee by Rachel. "Grace, are you certain?" With pride and concern in her eyes, she inquired. I grinned. "I'm confident it's more certain than ever." I returned to the old house that same day, not to make amends or engage in negotiations, but to put a stop to everything. Everyone in the family appeared to be waiting. Mom sat with an icy expression on her face in the living room. Dad was clearly disappointed and had his arms crossed. As the children played with toys on the floor, blissfully oblivious to the impending storm, Lauren stood behind Craig, her lips pushed together. I inhaled deeply before moving to the middle of the space. Calmly, I responded, "I'm come to get the remainder of my belongings. I also want to inform you that I will no longer be residing here as of today. I also don't have any additional living bills to pay." As though the room had been deprived of oxygen, the air became dense. Mom sprang to her feet. She had a gleeful, pale face. "You can't do this, Grace. Families don't desert one another." I fixed my unwavering gaze on her eyes. "No, Mother, this is not how real families take advantage of one another." Dad's voice boomed as he smashed his fist on the armrest. "You're just considering yourself." I swallowed, feeling a surge of rage, and responded with an odd composure. "For years, I've been considering everyone else. It's time to consider myself now." Lauren crossed her arms and scoffed. "Hold off until you require assistance. You shouldn't count on any of us to support you." With a grin devoid of resentment, I turned to face her. "A family that only understands how to make demands and never once inquires about my well-being is not what I need." As I silently made my way upstairs and collected my last possessions, nobody said. My laptop, my favorite coat, a few beloved novels, and a tiny luggage. That was it. Everything else, the ill-considered presents. I didn't regret leaving behind those painful memories. Mom came running up to me and grabbed my arm as I pulled my bag down the stairs, her eyes desperate. "Please consider it, Grace. This is something you'll regret." I muttered, "No, Mom. I'd regret staying." As I carefully released my arm from her hold, I pulled the door open. Every nerve in my body awoke as the icy January air struck my face. Like the last period on a long, agonizing chapter, I let the ancient wooden door close behind me as I stepped outside after pulling my bag across the threshold. My phone was constantly buzzing with calls and texts. As I drove back to Rachel's little apartment, I knew what they stated without even having to read them. Rachel greeted me with a big grin and a firm embrace. She said, "Welcome back to the world where people love themselves." That evening, drinking hot chocolate while nestled on a soft blanket on the little terrace, for the first time in years, I felt really alive. No more stifling pressure, no more charges. Just quiet, quiet, quiet. Like a windless winter night, I signed the lease for my first apartment 3 days later, a little light-filled space about 15 minutes from the office. It wasn't flawless. The flooring were ancient, the walls had some cracks, and the heater hummed softly. However, it seemed like a whole kingdom of freedom to me. After hanging the landscape photo on the wall, arranging my books on a shelf, and laying fresh sheets on the bed, I stood in the middle of the room, overcome with an inexplicable sense of happiness. I was going to start over here. I once believed that my first few days in my new flat would never come true. I got myself a nice cup of coffee, sat in the window-facing recliner, and savored the complete tranquility every morning as sunshine streamed into my room. No loud TV, no weeping children, no one yelling my name and making constant requests. Just me, all of my privacy, and total peace. My bank account started to shift such that it could no longer pay for a household's internet, water, and energy bills. Now, I had enough money coming in from my job to cover my personal needs, rent, and even savings. I was able to afford small pleasures for the first time in years: dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, and a new book, a beach vacation for the weekend. I joined a local yoga class, met new friends, and gradually created a life free from excessive demands and expectations, a life I never imagined I could have. Naturally, though, my family wasn't amenable to the change. I was just getting set to watch my favorite movie on a Sunday night when I received the first message. Mom sent Grace a text. "I need a conversation with your father. This division of the family cannot continue." Then, "Lauren, are you aware that the children are always inquiring about you? Do you not feel bad about it?" Prague followed shortly after. "The folks who reared you deserve gratitude, at the absolute least." Like a swelling wave, the texts were pouring in. The calls began when I didn't answer. Lauren, then Dad, then Mom. Everyone is taking turns. I gripped my phone and watched it repeatedly flash on and off, no longer experiencing guilt. Instead, I felt a calmness that was continuous and frigid. This manipulation of emotions was too familiar to me. Threatening but sweet phrases. Accusations combined with fake tears. It inhaled deeply. I then blocked each number individually. Parents, Craig and Lauren. After that, I accessed my social media accounts and disconnected from everyone who would serve as a conduit for their grievances and guilt trips to return to me. It wasn't simple. I fell into the chair, feeling as though I had just removed a bulky suit of armor that had held me in place for years. My fingers shook a little as I clicked the block button. I woke up the following morning feeling oddly relieved. There was silence on the phone, no more guilt-tripping calls or demanding texts. I sipped my coffee while seeing the street's naked trees from the window. A little smile appeared on my lips. I didn't regret the decision I had made for myself. On my way home from work that afternoon, I made a stop at a tiny bookshop. I purchased a gorgeous fountain pen, a new notepad, and a nice blue leather cover. I sat down at my workstation that evening, opened the first page, and started writing. This is where my new chapter starts. I was aware that there might be lonely times. On certain evenings, doubt or yearning would creep in. However, I was also aware that I would tackle any situation head-on. Day by day, my new existence became steadier, and I started to learn how to listen to my own voice rather than other people's. Sunlight poured through the window every morning, hope flooded my heart. Learn to appreciate the little things in life. A tea with a hint of fragrance. On a quiet afternoon, a beloved music is playing while cooking. Take a stroll at the park next to my place. Once these pleasures had been obscured by yells, scowls, and incessant demands, I gradually came to understand that I could live the life I want without permission. I no longer had to make sacrifices for individuals who had never really appreciated me in order to establish my value. I reflected on the years I had pushed myself, put in extra hours to pay the bills, sacrificed valuable weekends to watch kids, and carried about responsible parties that I had never been comfortable with in the first place. I always thought that if I worked hard enough and loved deeply enough, people would ultimately notice me. However, the reality was that my generosity merely gave them a sense of entitlement. I composed a statement late one night as I was making notes in my new notebook. One word at a time. I make a self-promise that I deserve to be respected, loved, and allowed to make my own decisions in life. I came to understand that love is not a mindless sacrifice. It's not sacrificing yourself for crumbs of love. Uplifting, sharing, and respecting one another are all aspects of true love, items that I never got in my previous house. I began establishing limits after that. I gained the ability to refuse irrational requests without feeling bad for prioritizing myself. I took soft skills lessons, worked on my job, and even enrolled in a weekend cooking class, something I had never dared to do previously, because I was always giving my time away to other people. Weekends were transformed into priceless times of genuine pleasure rather than being spent stumbling from fatigue. Brief road excursions, coffee dates with pals, cozy nights, reading under a lamp's pleasant light. I got back in touch with old pals, the ones I had overlooked in the midst of my family's turmoil, sincere friendships and critical dialogue, random outbursts of laughing. They resembled prescription drugs, bringing me back to life. Sitting at my favorite small cafe one spring day, I came to the realization that I no longer felt the desire to return. Put an end to your desire for acceptance. Don't wait for an apology or a hug to make amends. I was at ease with myself now. Even though my family still made an effort to connect with me on occasion, I didn't feel dragged back into the usual cycle of responsibility and guilt this time. Since I knew I had permanently left that darkness, I was able to grin at their attempts with composure. I made my own life decision, a life that was complete, unrestricted, and brimming with love. First, love for myself. My experience serves as a potent reminder that each person has the right to live their own life, not to cast a shadow on others. I at last felt truly free and happy when I had the guts to let go of things that weren't mine. Life was now about establishing my own worth and aspirations rather than making quiet sacrifices. To discover the light, sometimes, leaving even the most familiar places behind requires courage, and I succeeded. How do you feel about Grace's path? Was it appropriate for her to leave and take back her identity? Leave a comment with your ideas. For more touching and motivational family tales, remember to subscribe to the channel.